Bienvenidos. In today's lesson, we'll talk about a few stem-changing verbs. We will be conjugating several common verbs that have a stem change. The verbs we'll look at today are tener, venir, preferir, querer, and poder. To review what we've already learned about Spanish verbs, we've learned that there are four classes of verbs: AR, ER, IR, and irregular verbs. Today we'll be learning a subset of the AR, ER, and IR verbs, which are called stem-changing verbs. For the endings, they will follow the same patterns that we've learned for regular AR, ER, and IR verbs, but the stems will change in certain forms. So remember, we said before that each class of verbs has its own conjugation pattern. Conjugation means changing the forms of the verbs depending on the subject. A little more review about los verbos regulares en el presente. The AR verb endings that you've previously learned are o, as, a, amos, ais, and an. The ER verb endings o, es, e, hemos, eis, en. And IR verb endings o, es, e, imos, is, en. Since you've already become familiar with these endings, that will make your job today simpler because you already know how the verbs will end, so you'll just have to now get familiar with the way the stems will change. Remember, each verb has two parts, the stem and the ending. In the verbs that you've learned before, the stem is what stays the same, and the endings are how you change it for each subject. Now here you will have the endings that will follow these patterns you've already learned, but then you'll be introduced to a stem that will change. Let's look at the first verbs. The verbs here on this page are tener, venir, preferir, and querer. The verb tener means to have. You've already seen this verb in expressions about age in chapter 2. The verb tener, the stem is ten. And then, of course, it will have the regular ER verb endings. You'll notice that each subject, except for nosotros and vosotros, have a stem change. Instead of the stem ten, there's a slight difference. In the yo form, that difference is the presence of a G. So that becomes tengo, yo tengo. In the other forms, the stem will change. Instead of an E, it will have an IE. And then, of course, the regular endings. So the tú form is tienes, él, ella, usted tiene, nosotros tenemos, vosotros tenéis, and ellos, ellas, ustedes tienen. The next verb, venir, also has a G in the yo form, and then an IE instead of the E in every other form except nosotros and vosotros. And its endings follow the same pattern as the regular IR verbs that you learned in chapter 2. So the forms of venir, which means to come, the forms of venir are vengo, vienes, viene, venimos, venís, and vienen. The next verb is preferir, to prefer. Here, again, the nosotros and vosotros will stay the same. They will have the PREFER stem. And then in every person, including yo, every other person, yo, tú, él, ella, usted, and ellos, ellas, ustedes, they'll have an E to IE stem change. Yo prefiero, tú prefieres, él, ella, usted prefiere, nosotros preferimos, no stem change, vosotros preferís, again no stem change, and ellos, ellas, ustedes prefieren. The last verb on this page is querer, which means to want. Here, nosotros and vosotros will have no change, and every other form will have a change from E to IE in the stem, with the regular ER endings. Yo quiero, tú quieres, él, ella, usted quiere, nosotros queremos, vosotros queréis, and ellos, ellas, ustedes quieren. We have just one verb left, the verb poder, which means to be able to. This verb would then be followed by the infinitive of any other verb to tell what you are able to do. So here the forms of nosotros and vosotros will stay the same as we saw in the other verbs, and every other form will have a stem change from o in the infinitive to ue. So the forms are yo puedo, tú puedes, él, ella, usted puede, nosotros podemos, vosotros podéis, and ellos, ellas, ustedes pueden. And again, for the usage of this verb, if you wanted to say, I am able to speak Spanish, you would say, yo puedo hablar, an infinitive verb, español. So to tell that you are able to do any certain thing, you would use the verb poder, followed by the infinitive, the AR, ER, IR ending, of any verb in Spanish. Y ahora ustedes pueden conjugar estos verbos. Now you are able to conjugate these verbs.